Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of MMT Mondays. Growing up, I remember hearing the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But what if it has been broken the entire time, but we've been conditioned to view it as an inevitability? With that in mind, this week's episode is going to focus on the role of a safety net that a federal job guarantee plays when it comes to rejecting the notion that we have to tolerate unemployment. But why should we only focus on joblessness during economic downturns? Can't we dream bigger to demand an improvement in jobs even in good economic times? One of the most overused myths about raising the minimum wage to $15 is that it will cause massive layoffs in the private sector. Dr. Darrick Hamilton believes that a federal job guarantee can act not only as a safety net for workers, but as a tool to help empower the working class to demand a less precarious labor market. Dr. Hamilton believes that if the federal government offered a guaranteed job at $15 an hour plus health insurance, it would force private employers who wanted to hang on to their workforce to pay at least as much. Essentially, a federal job guarantee would set minimum standards for work. In our first video tonight, Dr. Pavlina Tcherneva lays out exactly what a federal job guarantee is and how it greatly differs from other counter-cyclical monetary and fiscal policies. Dr. Tcherneva begins by describing how a federal job guarantee acts as an employment safety net that guarantees a job to anyone who is willing and able to work, but has not been able to find employment elsewhere.
What is a job guarantee? Job guarantee is a program for direct employment. It is a program, as the name suggests, that guarantees work at base pay to anyone who's willing and able to work, who has not found decent or appropriate employment elsewhere. So you can think of it as a public option for work. You can think of it as a safety net, employment safety net. It is a policy that will provide on-demand work opportunities for people who want them.
Other monetary and fiscal policies have counter-cyclical features, but a job guarantee is superior to those because conventional counter-cyclical features only attempts to stabilize growth. But we know that growth doesn't always mean strong income or employment growth. Essentially, it doesn't translate to a quick recovery from the jobs lost during a downturn, so we end up with jobless recoveries. This has been especially clear over the last few decades as it has taken longer and longer to recover from lost payrolls. It has become the norm to stabilize growth, but not to stabilize income or employment. Going back to our main focus of this episode, why should we simply be okay with tolerating that? For example, if Lowe's or Home Depot were to have massive layoffs as a result of a minimum wage increase, then a job guarantee would act as a safety net for workers to know that they have a guaranteed job waiting on them. This is not only empowering to the worker, but it also serves as a way to hold the private sector accountable.
How does the job guarantee countercyclical feature differ from conventional countercyclical features? It is true that monetary and fiscal policies have countercyclical aspects to them. The job guarantee is in some sense superior to those because the countercyclical aspects of conventional policy stabilize or attempt to stabilize growth. But as we know, growth increasingly doesn't deliver strong income growth or employment growth, or in other words, it doesn't really translate in a very quick recovery of the jobs that were lost during a downturn. And so what we've ended up with are the so-called jobless recoveries. And what's also peculiar about that is that with time, over the last few decades, it has taken longer and longer to recover lost payrolls. So it has become the norm to stabilize growth but not stabilize income and employment. The job guarantee does things directly. The job guarantee, by providing employment to those who need it, essentially institutes a pro-employment countercyclical stabilizer. So essentially what happens in a downturn when Lowe's or Home Depot lay off en masse thousands of people, many of those will have all of them in fact will have the opportunity to take a job if they wish in the job guarantee. Now, some of them might wish to avail themselves of the conventional counter-cyclical measures like unemployment insurance, etc. And that's fine. But unemployment insurance expires in a few weeks, and the job guarantee will be there. And so for some people, unemployment insurance might not be an option at all. They might prefer a stable employment at a living wage. And so what happens is, in the midst of mass layoffs, some of those people who lose their private sector employment trickle into the job guarantee program. Government spending expands and thus provides the counter-cyclical stabilization, while at the same time provides jobs for those who need it. As the economy recovers, then people can find employment in the private sector. They can return to their previously lost jobs or better employment opportunities in the private sector. So the job guarantee shrinks in a counter-cyclical way when the economy recovers. So what we've got is not only full employment, but we make jobless recoveries a thing of the past.
In our second video, we are going to look at a webinar that took place in the last week featuring Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and Dr. Darrick Hamilton, where they discuss how a federal job guarantee is the cornerstone of an equitable economy. This past week, Congresswoman Pressley introduced a resolution in the House of Representatives, and it calls on the government to make having a job a legal right. Pressley explained that a job guarantee would address the current unemployment crisis, make our economy more resilient, begin to close the racial and gender income gaps, and lay the foundation for a truly just and equitable economic recovery. Pressley explains that providing a federally enforceable right to a quality job that provides $15 an hour minimum wage, health care, and paid family leave is simply being responsive to what workers have been demanding for decades.
Our resolution calls for a federal job guarantee, which would provide every person in America within, and this is really important, an enforceable legal right to a quality job. It calls for the creation of federal jobs that meet long-neglected community, physical, and human infrastructure needs, such as you referenced earlier, delivering high-quality care for children and seniors, building and sustaining 21st century transit systems, strengthening our neighborhoods, and protecting the environment. Now, of course, we are building on past legislation, but this resolution, and what makes it unique, calls for the creation of a permanent program, one that is available to all adults seeking employment and federally funded via permanent, non-discretionary spending. Because we can't let shifting political whims dictate what should be our structural supports. So this resolution really considers the systemic barriers that have that have relegated people, and also neglected them, but relegated people to jobs that exploit their humanity and exclude them from the workforce altogether. It guarantees access to the benefits of dignified, gainful employment, and those include a humane minimum wage of $15 an hour, healthcare and paid sick days and family leave, a right to a union, and the ability to bargain collectively. Access to supportive services, including childcare and transportation services, which can otherwise be extremely cost prohibitive to maintain steady, remunerative work. Opportunities to build skills and to gain access to higher paying positions through on-the-job training, as well as paid apprenticeships, credentialing, and other career building opportunities. This resolution establishes a job guarantee as a critical facet of a climate-friendly economy, and also creates a structure to compensate historically under-recognized and uncompensated labor, like domestic and social care, ecological preservation, cultural, scientific, and creative work. This resolution is comprehensive, and what is most important to me, it is responsive. It is responsive to what workers have been demanding for decades.
Dr. Darrick Hamilton reiterates Congresswoman Pressley's sentiment about a job guarantee being a movement grounded in good ideas, good economics, and justice. Dr. Hamilton explains that we make the political choice to allow unemployment. A job guarantee would remove the threat of unemployment altogether to give workers more bargaining power. This would remove the threat of workers being laid off from their private sector jobs following a minimum wage increase. economists should not presume that the inequality and poverty is inevitable. We can define the market and define the moral foundation and values that we want as a country.
We need a movement to get big, bold justice accomplished. And that's going to take ideas, it's going to take action and advocacy, and it's going to take policy. So these collaborative relationships that we have and that have worked on, stemming some ideas and the great work that Policy Link did and taking the ball and running with it, getting all these people to sign on, and then Congresswoman Pressley taking the leadership by putting out this resolution. This is how we get things done, and there's joy in this. I'm genuinely happy and feel really good about this. Now, of course, we got a long way to go. The sobering reality is a lot of people are suffering. But the beauty is this is a movement and this is what it's about, and we're committed to it. And I think that's important. It's a movement grounded in good ideas, good economics, and justice. The economics are sound. So, the second part of the question, what are some of the things that would come about from a job guarantee? It would literally eliminate involuntary unemployment. That's not pie in the sky. That's something we can achieve. We make a political choice to allow for unemployment. We can make a different political choice. We get rid of the oxymoron of working poverty altogether. Obviously, people working 40 hours a week shouldn't be poor. In fact, nobody should be poor, but at the very least, we can do that. It would remove the threat of unemployment so workers in general could have better bargaining power. It would be an implicit floor for our labor market. Labor markets are about power. We need to better enable workers where they can go to work without that threat that they can be at the whim unemployed so that they can negotiate better in ways that we might not even conceive of. When we have economic downturns, we heard in the last recession, we had the moral hazard of having to bail out banks for some of their malfeasance that might have gotten us to, and it's not just banks, it would have the financial industry that might have got us to a certain position by having products in the market that were irresponsible, that had too much risk, that were in some ways predatory. Well, we won't be beholden in the future if we have a federal job guarantee to address that moral hazard, because the federal government would have in place the mechanism so that people won't suffer so much. I won't go on and on and on, but I can say that there are many. It would reduce the strain on state and local budgets. It would transform our economy from low wages to moderate and high wages. People make the argument, well, what's it going to do to low wage work? Won't it eliminate and get rid of low wage work? That's not necessarily a bad thing. If we ensure that every worker has a good quality job, why shouldn't we aspire to that? That is something we can do and something we should do. And the racial dimensions, well, it would mitigate some of the problems associated with labor market discrimination by demonstrating that everybody has access to a quality job, regardless of their gender, their race, et cetera. So it does so much. And again, at the risk of not going on and on and on, we can direct resources to areas that need them most. So, we know that the program is countercyclical. So it starts getting bigger when there's an economic downturn, when we need federal stimulus, when we need to ensure that workers have a job. It starts to decrease when we have an expansionary economy. That's an automatic stabilizing effect that's good. It'll be demand stimulating so that when we do need more aggregate demand, the program kicks in. But here's something else that it does. It directs resources, regardless of whether it's a business cycle or not, towards areas that need it most. So if we have areas of the country that for whatever reason, the closure of a factory, it's starting to dilapidate. Well, this is when a federal job guarantee kicks in. It sends resources to those areas. We can define the economy we want with this program. We can have a care economy. We can have a green economy. We can, the future really is boundless. And this ain't pie in the sky. This is the point of government. If we're going to have an industrial policy, center workers, center people, and direct resources in the areas that we need it most.
The tweet exchange above sums up a culmination of years of dedicated research and advocacy regarding a federal job guarantee. Dr. Tcherneva has spent years collaborating with policymakers from the U.S. and abroad on designing and evaluating employment programs with the hope of challenging our society to imagine a world where unemployment is a myth and the dignity of being able to earn a living wage is guaranteed. Representative Pressley introducing the resolution for a federal job guarantee represents the next step in liberating the working class from the exploitation of their labor and ensuring a more equitable economy for all of us.
The unjust, and I consider really false, binary choices that are often foisted onto us when it comes to how to truly center the needs of the people and how to meet them. You know, I think it's really ironic that every time we push for bold policies that do center people and those most impacted, whether you're talking about, student debt or paid family leave, just as two quick examples, or childcare, we're most always met with the same critiques of how will we pay for it? How can we best target relief? Last year, Congress passed a $750 billion, that's with a B, funding bill to bankroll the Pentagon and defense contractors, all while arguing that direct payments to put cash in people's pockets, survival checks, are too expensive in the midst of a public health pandemic, no less. So like anything that is a priority, if we really do believe that a budget is a statement of our values, then we should appropriate the funds. It's not a matter of resource. You know, so often I've asserted that we don't suffer from a deficit of resource, it's a deficit of empathy. You know, and people are experiencing a tsunami of hurt and we can relieve it. And the reality is that we're already paying by not paying for this. You know, what's the cost of having millions unemployed, or tens of millions paid an unlivable wage, or hundreds of thousands being unhoused or facing homelessness? The only thing we can't afford right now is the status quo, or an economic recovery that level sets us to what was already an insufficient and unjust, quote unquote, normal. We really, you know, Professor Hamilton speaks about this often, as does my sister in service, Representative Ocasio-Cortez. We just can't buy into this false scarcity narrative because the money is there. And we can't allow these policy decisions to be made at the expense of our communities any longer.
You want to speak to it here, Darrick? You want to add to this?
And again, I'm going to be brief because I know there are lots of questions. We can do the accounting exercise, and we've done it, so we can give actual numbers to it. But the Congresswoman highlights it just fine in the sense that budgets are priorities. So the real question is, do we have the capacity? And the resounding answer is yes. We've demonstrated capacity. Then now it's the question of choice, and do we want to implement it, as well as all the other benefits that come about from it, and in relation to the cost that we experience if we don't address those things, the cost of unemployment, as was mentioned, and you know, the fact that the program gets more expensive in economic downturn, that's a feature, not a bug. That's when the government should be spending more. That's when the government should be running a deficit. And matter of fact, we need to redefine that term deficit, because investments in our most treasured resource, which is people, should not be defined as a deficit. Those are just that, investments in the American people.
As you can see, a federal job guarantee provides a clear rejection of the notion that unemployment is something that must be tolerated. It also provides a safety net to prevent workers from worrying about losing their job as a result of speaking up and demanding a minimum wage increase. Just like Representative Pressley and Dr. Hamilton concluded in the webinar, our nation's policies should reflect our values, and if they do, then Congress should have no hesitation to appropriate the funds. Pressley explained that we don't suffer from a deficit of resources, but rather a deficit of empathy. Instead of letting so-called deficit hawks get away with outdated "how do we pay for it" argument, we must ask, what is the cost of having millions unemployed or being paid an unlivable wage? The only thing we cannot afford to do is maintain the status quo. Dr. Hamilton sums up the issue perfectly. He states the real question is, do we have the capacity for a job guarantee? And the answer is a resounding yes, because we have done it before. What we need is to redefine the image that society has regarding deficits. Investing in our most treasured resource, being people, should not be defined as a deficit. They are investments in providing a more just and equitable future. It's not about a deficit of resources, but rather a deficit of courage. If you enjoyed tonight's video, make sure to check us out at realprogressives.org and subscribe to get notifications on new video streams in YouTube, Periscope, Facebook, and Rockfit. Thank y'all and have a great week.